During this session, we'll look at several important steps in planning the pesticide application. The information is based largely on Chapter 10 of the National Pesticide Applicator Certification Core Manual. Reading and following the label is a very important part of the entire pesticide application process. If you remember, a key point mentioned during the pesticide labeling presentation, you must read the label at least 4 times, one of those times being before you apply the pesticide. The directions for use section of the label includes information about the target pests, the approved treatment sites, application rates, droplet size, general application methods, sprayer cleanout, and it provides pesticide container and storage disposal guidelines. And yes, I think he borrowed his friend's hat for this photo. As you probably heard many times, the label is the law. I have 4 questions for you, and when I ask you if you can do something, I want you to think of it from a legal standpoint. Is it legal? First scenario in question. Imagine you're in such a hurry one day that you don't take the time to read the pesticide label before you measure your pesticide and you end up applying a pesticide below the rate listed on the label. Is that legal? Yes, this is legal. It's not smart though because it's a waste of time, product, and money, but it is legal. It can also favor the development of resistance. Second scenario in question. Now let's look at the opposite scenario. You're in such a hurry one day that you don't take the time to read the pesticide label before you measure your pesticide and you end up applying a pesticide above the maximum rate listed on the label. Is that legal? No, this is not legal. The maximum rate is the maximum rate. You could damage the treatment site, contaminate the environment, impact the REI, and end up with excessive residues on the crops. Third scenario in question. I have another scenario. You have a horrible problem with cockroaches at a community recreation center. A friend tells you about a great insecticide they use at work. You order some, apply it, and then notice cockroaches were not listed on the label. Is this legal? Yes, this is legal. However, it's another decision that might result in a waste of time, product, and money if it doesn't manage the pest. Last scenario in question. You did a little more research and found a pesticide manufactured to control cockroaches. You can use it outside, but it specifically states not to use it near food or eating areas. You decide to use it in the break room outside of lunch hours. Is this legal? No, this is not legal because the label specifically prohibits the use of the product near food or eating areas. Even if the application occurred outside of lunch hours, there could still be food stored in the break room that could absorb the pesticide. As you continue to review the label, search for requirements or restrictions you must consider before, during, or after the application. For example, what's the restricted entry interval, or REI? The REI is the length of time that must pass after the application before a person can re-enter the area without protection. Will you need to post the area with a field posting or REI sign? Are there any post-application procedures you need to prepare for, such as incorporating the pesticide into the soil or watering it in? Does the label contain warnings about drinking, fishing, or swimming in water recently treated with the pesticide? Are there specific measures to protect people, beneficial insects, water sources, and wildlife that you must follow? What about plant back restrictions? Do you need to wait a certain amount of time after the application before you can transplant ornamentals or plant crops? Lastly, does the label list the length of time you must wait after the application before harvesting a crop or preparing livestock for slaughter? Does the label list other factors you must consider, which might directly impact the effectiveness of your application or the timing of it, such as the time of year or the life stage of the pest? Do you need to time your application based on the crop's life stage? Check the label for restrictions on the equipment you can use to apply the pesticide. We talked a little bit about tank mixing during the first session on pest management. It's when two or more pesticides are mixed together for a single application. You can purchase prepared tank mixes, often referred to as premixes and prepacks, or you can mix products together yourself. People tank mix because it's convenient. It saves time, labor, money, and fuel if you're applying with an ATV or tractor. However, not all pesticides are compatible. If they aren't, you could run into problems in your tank or at the treatment site. Some of the problems you might notice when mixing two or more products that don't physically or chemically suit each other are the mixture might create heat or precipitation. You might notice separation or clumping of ingredients, inactivity of active ingredients. The mixture could lead to phytotoxicity, which you'll remember as plant damage. At first glance, the pesticide products might appear to be compatible, but might become incompatible later once you apply them to the site. There are two types of incompatibility: physical and chemical. When two or more products are physically incompatible, the products might not mix well together or stay mixed. There might be separation or a consistency of putty, paste, or cottage cheese. Some of the causes of physical incompatibility are inadequate agitation in the tank, improper mixing order, mixing with liquid fertilizers, hard water, or lack of stable emulsifiers in emulsifiable concentrate formulations. There are two types of chemical incompatibility and results. In the first type, the pesticide activity of at least one of the components is reduced when two or more products are mixed. This defeats the purpose of combining them in the first place because suddenly one won't work as well as it would have if it was just left alone. You might know people like that. They don't work as well in group settings. In the second type of chemical incompatibility, the activity of two or more products applied together may be greater than if each were applied separately. While that might seem great, if you have a bad chemical reaction between the two incompatible products, it might weaken the selective nature of the products and damage plants. Here's a good example of two products that are chemically incompatible. Most people are aware that chlorine and ammonia can create a toxic gas when mixed together. But did you know chlorine is also chemically incompatible with vinegar? That's a great piece of information to pass along to others because sometimes people think they're going green by using vinegar to clean, so they'll clean with that, while Clorox might also be used when cleaning the same area. This could lead to a very hazardous situation. Heat, a color change, the formation of a precipitate, surface scum, foam, sludge, or gel could also occur. Read the pesticide label for tank mixing information. You might notice recommendations for tank mixing known to be compatible or specific prohibitions for tank mixes known to be incompatible. This slide shows excerpts from two different product labels. One describes compatibility and the other highlights incompatibility. The label on the top states that the product may be tank mixed with other currently registered pesticides unless expressly prohibited by the product label. The label in the lower right corner is very interesting because it doesn't identify incompatibility with other pesticides. It warns about the possible damage to the plant if mixed with adjuvants. It says adjuvants, including surfactants, spreaders, spreader stickers, spray thickeners, foaming agents, activators, detergents, and drift reducing agents combined with this product can damage the leaf tissue or turf grass. Not all pesticide labels will contain tank mixing information. The absence of tank mixing information on the label doesn't mean you can combine it with all other pesticides and/or adjuvants. As is described in the label on the top left of the screen, a small volume mixing test with the other products is recommended to ensure compatibility. This is known as a jar test, and you are responsible to perform one if you want to tank mix products when guidance doesn't exist on the labels. The concept of a jar test is simple. You'll run a very small practice mixing test in a glass or plastic jar to simulate your spray tank. Next, put on the personal protective equipment stated on the label because, after all, you're going to conduct a jar test for a small-scale tank mix. Begin by filling the jar with water or other carrier, often fertilizer, until it's 20 to 50% full. Then add products one at a time in proportionate amounts and in proper order, which we'll cover in a moment. Mix, swirl, or shake the jar to see what happens. Let the jar sit for 10 to 15 minutes and then check the mixture again. This will enable you to see if the contents settle out or separate over time. This will help you determine if the same thing will happen in your spray tank once you reach your application site. If the jar is giving off heat, the mixture looks like cottage cheese, or the products have separated into layers, these particular products are incompatible. Just think what a mess this would have been to clean up if you'd mixed a tank load instead of a small jar. If nothing happens and it looks like the mixture will work, check it for performance and phytotoxicity. If you don't notice a problem, you may mix the products together in your tank. Sometimes people get overwhelmed when they see the tank mixing order information in the study guide. The order on this slide and the next serve as a guide when mixing carriers, adjuvants, and different formulations together in one tank. The good news is you will not be in a situation when you need to mix together every type of formulation that exists into one tank. In an actual work situation, the order will seem much easier to comprehend. To begin, you will first prepare your tank. Fill the spray tank 20 to 50% full with a carrier. Your carrier is usually water or fertilizer. Start agitating the tank. If you've determined from the label and/or jar test that you might have physical or chemical compatibility problems, you might be able to add a compatibility agent to remedy the problem. It's key to add the compatibility agent before you have a compatibility problem, not after. Now let's look at the order of different formulations. Remember, I said you really won't be in a situation where you need to add all of the following formulations together in one tank. Maybe you'll mix a wettable powder in a solution and would only need to know to add the wettable powder to the tank before you add the solution. Here's the order. Add suspension products. First, dry formulations. Wettable powders, dry flowables, water dispersible granules as a pre-slurry if necessary. Second, liquid formulations. Flowables, liquids, microencapsulated. Add solution products. Solutions, soluble powders. Add surfactants or other adjuvants if needed. This might be a coloring agent, a spreader, or a drift retardant. Add emulsion products. Remember, these are your oil or petroleum-based products we described in Chapter 4, emulsifiable concentrates. I have good news. There's an app for that. You can find several tank mixing phone apps by searching the internet. There are even a few industry-specific apps. Many also enable you to keep your tank mix data for future reference and submit pesticide use reports to your local regulator agency. Just remember, the safest time to use the phone app is before you tank mix, not while you tank mix. The most appropriate mixing and loading area is one that is outdoors in a well-ventilated area with adequate lighting. You need to have enough light to read the label instructions and all of the measuring utensils and equipment clearly. Also, make sure that the area is secure and away from other people, food, animals, and other items that might become contaminated. During the environmental protection session, we talked about ways to protect ground and surface water when applying pesticides. You need to protect water sources from pesticides when you mix and load as well. Mix and load pesticides in an area away from water sources like ponds, streams, lakes, drains, or canals. If possible, install a containment pad at a designated site, such as the one shown in this photo. Containment pads prevent pesticides from seeping into the soil and are easy to clean. When possible, mix and load the pesticides at the application site, but be careful about water sources in the area and try not to use the same area repeatedly. We covered PPE and protective clothing extensively during our 6th session, but as a reminder, before you work with any pesticide, make sure you have the correct protective clothing or PPE, and that each item is in good condition, is clean, and fits properly. Don't forget to check the label to see if there are additional PPE items, such as chemical-resistant aprons and boots, when mixing and loading. When you mix and load pesticides, you're working with pesticides in their concentrated and most hazardous state. To prevent spills, close pesticide containers after each use, even if you plan to mix more of the same pesticide. Use a sharp knife or scissors to open paper or cardboard containers to prevent tearing and spilling dry products. Wash the knife or scissors afterward, label them for pesticide use only, and do not use them for any other purpose. Use an accurate scale, measuring device, or utensil you can read easily. There's an assortment of glass or plastic utensils of various measurements. The pesticide handler in this photo is working with small and precise amounts of pesticide and therefore needs to use a pipette to extract the pesticide from the container. Some pesticides react with metal, especially aluminum or iron, so avoid using metal measuring utensils. After you're done measuring and transferring the pesticide to the application equipment, close the container tightly and place it in storage. Never leave your measuring devices unattended. Wash or clean them after use and store them in the pesticide storage area as well. Make sure they're clearly marked for pesticide use only. Additional safety measures to reduce the risk of exposure while mixing pesticides include: when you're transferring pesticides to the application equipment, be very careful. You want to avoid splashing or spilling the concentrate product. Stay upwind of pesticide vapors or dust. This does sound odd because one might think upwind might mean there's enough wind to be hazardous, and perhaps you should wait to mix, load, or apply pesticides. However, in the study guide, they mentioned if there was a slight breeze present while mixing, you don't want the pesticide vapors or dust to drift toward your face. It's much safer to pour liquids below eye level to prevent eye exposures. Never leave a full or partially full sprayer unattended, especially if you're applying a pesticide in a high traffic or populated area. After mixing and transferring the pesticide to the application equipment, close the container and place it in storage. When filling a tank using a water pipe or hose, do all you can to prevent back siphoning. Back siphoning occurs in a situation such as that one shown in the top picture. The handler has dropped the hose down into the tank while they measure out pesticides. Once the handler turns off the hose, it will create a vacuum effect, and the water and pesticides will be sucked back through the hose and potentially contaminate the water source. The bottom photo depicts an air gap created when you hold the hose up high enough that it won't come into contact with the liquid in the tank. You can also install check valves or anti-siphon devices on the equipment, which automatically shut it off if the pump fails or a drop in water pressure occurs. This is especially important with any chemigation application. Now we'll talk about how to properly clean and dispose of pesticide containers. I'm sure many of you have heard about the need to triple rinse pesticide containers, so this information will be a review. Once you've used all the pesticide in a container, it's important to triple rinse the containers immediately. If you wait too long, it could be harder to remove any residue, and then the contents and the container would be considered hazardous waste. As is described in the slide, begin by completely emptying the pesticide concentrate from the container. You can pour it into your spray tank. Do this immediately upon emptying the container. When you're making up your tank mix, use the container rinse water in that tank batch. If you wait until later to clean the container, you may not get all the residue out, and then the container is considered full and hazardous, so don't put this task off until later. Let's go through the process of triple rinsing. First, make sure the pesticide container is completely empty of pesticide concentrate. Sometimes the concentrate gets stuck in the handle or around the neck of the container. Next, fill the container about 20% full with water. Put the cap or lid back on the container and shake the container for at least 30 seconds, making sure the rinse water reaches all the crevices inside the container. Remove the lid and drain the rinseate into the spray tank. Repeat these steps 2 more times. Some people have a pressure rinse system, which works even more effectively. This system has a sharp nozzle at the end of a high-pressure water hose system. The nozzle is used to puncture the side of the container. The handler holds the container upside down over the mix tank as they power rinse the inside of the container for at least 30 seconds. After they're triple or pressure rinsed, plastic pesticide containers can be recycled. Stained containers are acceptable, but containers with pesticide residues are not, and dirty containers can jeopardize the recycling program. Ask your pesticide dealer or manufacturer if they have a pesticide container recycling program, or contact your regulatory agency for ideas. If plastic container recycling is not available in your area, dispose of containers in the local landfill or incineration facility. To find a container recycling program, you can also contact the Agricultural Container Recycling Council. You might not be able to rinse every pesticide container you use. This photo shows bags of treated seed. The best way to clean and dispose of this type of pesticide container is to first empty the bag out as best as possible. There will probably be dusty particles on the bottom of the bag. Contact the dealer or manufacturer to ask if you can return the bag to them or if they are recyclable. If you're not able to return or recycle the bag, you can dispose of them as refuse. Make sure you cut the bag enough to make it unusable. You don't want someone to take it and use it as the perfect laundry bag. Many pesticide applications are made using handheld and backpack sprayers. If you ask a group of pesticide handlers the safest way to walk when applying pesticides with a backpack sprayer, you'll probably hear several different answers. Some will say they walk backward to avoid walking through the pesticide. Others will say to walk forward to avoid tripping because they're applying in sloping or rocky terrain. Others might say they only apply herbicide spot treatments and just move from one patch to another, not really thinking about it. If it's possible, try to apply pesticides in a way to prevent you from walking through the treated area. If you must walk through the treated area, wear PPE, such as shin or knee-high rubber boots, spray-resistant or waterproof pants or coveralls to protect you from the spray. If you apply pesticides using a backpack or handheld sprayer, there might be a time when the equipment leaks or malfunctions. It's important to stop applying pesticides immediately to repair the equipment. If you're having a hard time identifying the cause of the problem, you can look at the equipment manufacturer's website or contact them directly for possible solutions. Many have troubleshooting pages like the one shown on the right. You can also watch video clips on equipment repair found at the Gimplers.com website. Some problems might be general, and others might require replacement parts unique to the equipment you're using. Therefore, the manufacturer will be the best place to start. If you look at this photo, you can definitely tell this type of application equipment produces large amounts of pesticides. Without the correct protection, the pesticide handler operating this equipment could become exposed. A few examples of high exposure application equipment and situations include mist blower or air blast sprayers, aerosol and fog generators, high pressure sprayers and power dusters, equipment that directs application overhead, like in trees or roof eaves, applications in enclosed areas such as warehouses, greenhouses, homes, silos, or ships. It's very important to wear the PPE listed on the label for the site. Make sure you use the correct respiratory equipment for these occasions. As was mentioned on the previous slide, without the correct protection, you could become exposed to the pesticide. It's equally important to monitor the treatment site before, during, and after the application. Even if you checked it before you mixed the pesticide, things change quickly and you don't want to expose anyone else to the pesticide. Make sure the area is free of people, toys, pets, wildlife, and any other items that could become contaminated. Check the pesticide label for the REI, or any specified ventilation requirements if applications are made in enclosed spaces. When you're applying the pesticide, turn the equipment off when you pause or make a turn during the application, especially if your site is near a road. It's hard to predict when a car will pass by. It's also necessary to monitor the application. Make sure the pesticide is being applied evenly and that it's reaching the target site. If you're applying a granular product, remove excess granules from non-target areas such as sidewalks. Watch the appearance of pesticide to make sure the application is uniform. Does it need constant agitation to remain in suspension? Check hoses, valves, and nozzles for clogs or leaks during the application. Take tools and extra nozzles with you so you can clean or repair equipment if needed directly at the site. After mixing, loading, and applying pesticides, clean the application equipment and yourself thoroughly. Before you begin cleaning the equipment, review the label once more to see if you need to wear additional PPE, such as an apron or eye protection. This was emphasized earlier in the course, but it's definitely worth repeating. After the equipment is empty, clean inside, outside, nozzles, and hopper openings. Rinsate is the word used to describe the liquid obtained from rinsing pesticide containers and application equipment. There are different things you can do with the rinsate depending if you've rinsed it with water or water and a special cleaning agent or detergent solution. We'll highlight the difference in the next couple of slides. Since rinsate also contains pesticides, do not allow it to run into a drain, canal, stream, or storm sewer. You must protect water sources. The best plan is to carry rinse water with you so you can rinse your equipment out at the same application site. This will enable you to collect and apply the rinsate directly to the same site at or below the label rate. Don't worry, it won't wash off the pesticide you recently applied. At this point, the tank is fairly clean. Collect and hold rinsate for use in a subsequent spray batch if a similar product is to be mixed later. Another option is to collect the rinsate and use it as mix water in the subsequent spray batches. Make sure the collected rinsate is compatible with the other products that you might mix it with. Finally, if you couldn't apply the rinsate to a labeled site or can't use the rinsate for subsequent spray batches, it'll most likely need to be disposed of as hazardous waste. Instead of applying it to the site, you can also collect and hold the rinsate for use in future pesticide mixtures, provided that the pesticide in the rinsate is labeled for use on the target site where the new mixture will be applied, that the amount of pesticide in the rinsate added to the amount of pesticide in the subsequent spray batch doesn't exceed the label rate for the target site, and that the rinsate is used to dilute a mixture containing the same or compatible pesticides. When product residues left in the tank pose concern for subsequent tank mixes, it's necessary to decontaminate the tank. If tank contamination is a major concern, labels have procedures listed for decontamination. Make sure you follow the label for decontamination instructions and materials for cleaning the equipment. Some pesticides, such as petroleum-based products, use a carrier that might require special cleaning agents or high water pressure. If the label doesn't indicate a special cleaning agent, as a basic rule, you can use a water detergent solution. After adding the appropriate cleaning solution, circulate it through the entire system for 3 to 5 minutes. Then flush the entire system twice with clean water. In this scenario, you are not simply rinsing with water, but have added other materials, and as a result, the rinsate contains cleaning agents. Don't apply this rinsate to the site or save it for subsequent mixes, as we described earlier. Rinsates containing cleaning agents might harm the plant, animal, or surface, or be incompatible with the pesticide. Any unusable material will most likely be considered a hazardous waste. Clean the entire spray system thoroughly after each use or when changing pesticides. Sloppy cleanup practices are one of the main causes of equipment failure or malfunction. Pesticides left in or on equipment can lead to equipment failure or can react with pesticides used in the equipment in the future. Residues can corrode metal parts, plug hoses, or damage pumps and valves if not removed immediately after use. Don't forget to thoroughly clean the inductor, valves, hoses, nozzle bodies, nozzles, filters, and screens. There are tank cleaning products that aid in neutralizing and removing pesticide residues and remove mineral deposits and rust. Adding lightweight oil with the final flush of water will leave a protective coating on the inside of the tank, pump, and plumbing. Finally, to prevent corrosion of equipment parts, remove nozzle tips and screens, store them in a can of light oil, such as diesel or kerosene, add a small amount of oil and rotate the pump 4 or 5 revolutions by hand to coat the inner surfaces, replace any worn out, deteriorated, or broken parts, and if storing equipment outside, remove hoses, wipe them clean of oil, and store them inside to protect them from weather. Before you leave, don't forget to wash with soap and water. Clean, dry, and store your PPE at the work site. As you see in this photo, the site has lockers, which makes it convenient for the employees. Once you return home, take a shower and wash your hair so you can remove any pesticide residues. Then put on clean clothes and shoes. Your role and responsibility as a pesticide handler is extremely important. The work you do and how you perform it can have a direct impact on the pests you're trying to control, the treatment site, the surrounding environment, and public health. Pesticide handlers who are conscientious and professional produce safe and plentiful food and fiber, protect public health from vector-borne diseases, create value for property owners through landscapes and structures, protect land and water ecosystems from invasive species, enhance quality of life through parks and recreation, and create safe roadways and other rights of way. This last section of Chapter 10 addresses professionalism. The fact that you're attending this course signifies you already take your role seriously and are interested in broadening your knowledge about pesticides, including how to use them safely and correctly and minimizing risk to yourself, other people, and the environment. Keeping accurate application records will enable you to not only comply with federal and local pesticide use requirements, but will serve as a way to reflect back on previously applied products and their effectiveness in managing pests. Over the past few years, the general public has become increasingly aware of and interested in pesticides and pesticide use. It's possible you've also been approached by someone who wanted to know why you're applying pesticides and the impacts the pesticide would have on the environment and human health. Pesticide handlers who have contracts with homeowner associations and those who work for municipalities might also have been asked to stop using certain pesticides completely. Consumers' preferences can also influence the way produce is grown, causing some growers to shift from using conventional pesticides to organic. While it might seem frustrating at times to have people outside of your industry influence your pest management practices, it's beneficial to communicate with customers, neighbors, beekeepers, and the general public about your work and the safety measures you take when working with pesticides. Finally, share information about the integrated pest management strategies you've incorporated to reduce pest populations, as well as your reliance on pesticides as your only pest management tool.